but seldom, if ever, heard.
My grandfather and grandma, they lived on a property. They were given permission to set up a camp, which was 2 very small tin shacks. The camp had probably about 20 people there, women, my uncles, aunties, my mum, and lots of cousins. So I remember lots of laughter. And every night you were sung to sleep by the aunts and uncles. And their favourite was Joey's song from Bill Haley and the Comets. It's just an instrumental, and whenever I hear it, I'm just transported back to the camp.
In 1960, there were fewer than 150,000 Aborigines living in Australia. The majority lived in reserves and missions, well away from major towns and cities. To assimilate Aboriginal children into white society, successive Australian governments had sanctioned a policy of removing them from their families.
I remember the night before, Mum kept saying, "You're going on a train ride." So in the morning, Mum dressed us all and we were just excited to go to the train, and she kept saying, "Always remember your manners." And she kept brushing our hair, which she never used to do. I had on a new dress. I can still see the colour, and it had fruit all over it. Pears, apples, oranges, cherries. The background was green, and the top half was red, and I had a red cardigan. My eldest brother Barry was 9, Whitty was 7, I was 5, Robbie was 4, Kevin was 2, and the twins were 3 months old. We just looked up at this huge train, and then in time Mum said, "Get on the train now, all you kids, get on the train." And so we got inside and we're running up and down because we'd never seen inside a train. We looked at the seats and we checked out the toilet. We were so excited with the toilet because we'd never seen a toilet. We were told to take our seats, and then the train jerked forward. And I was looking out the window and I saw my mum and my aunties just standing there and waving a white hanky. So my mum had lost 7 children overnight, and she didn't even have a photograph. That was the 22nd of April 1960.
It would be more than 20 years before Donna saw her mother again. In the 1960s, government films presented an idealised view of family life.
Our street is pretty typical of any new suburban road in southern Australia.
White Australia was a country where parents could raise healthy, well-behaved children in quiet suburbia. The vast majority of married women were stay-at-home housewives. On average, they bore 3.5 children, and there was full employment for their husbands. It was a bountiful picture. The streets were clean, and it was safe enough to leave your children unattended when you went shopping. The reality, of course, was a lot different.
My mother started having children when she was 16. By the time she was 29, she'd had 8 children, and my father was fairly alcoholic and had really bad temper. So they tried to stay together, but it was a bit of a nightmare. They had no money, they were poor. Every year we would go to our grandparents, my mother's parents, for Christmas, and they would give us new underwear, new singlet and a new pair of undies. That's sort of how poor we were. And there's a photo of us all lined up in our underwear. Yeah, it's sort of sad but funny at the same time. I mean, I remember good times as a little kid with my brothers and sisters, but I don't remember much love holding and, you know, hugging. But a lot of families were like that, I think. There's no way you could talk to adults in the way that children or young adults talk to their parents now. You had to obey rules. You know, there were consequences, and in some ways, when my father was alive, it was violent consequences. You'd be hit with a stick or, or, you know, I remember once it was pretty weird actually, and it makes me quite sad. My father was not good at being kind if he did something wrong, and I remember one time he picked me upside down and was hitting me with a bread knife, and that was very disturbing. So, you know, and in those days there was that thing about when you smack kids it makes them better, makes them tougher. I don't agree with that.
In the Australia of the 1960s, the family was the key element of society. Being married and having kids was not just a personal achievement, but also the fulfilment of a social obligation. But for Rose Kruger, who'd been orphaned at an early age, it went much deeper.
You've always got this want in you for a mum and a dad. You've never called anybody mum or dad. But having your own children makes it a little bit lighter. Well, I married this guy who was a bit of a drinker, and we had 3 children, beautiful kids. But life just got worse. He got more into the drink, very abusive. I was told that if I did leave him, I would have to leave my children somewhere and get a job to support myself. My answer to that was, my mother dumped me, I'm not dumping my kids. I stuck with him for 25 years.
For married couples in the 1960s, being unable to have children was considered a great tragedy. But there were options.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Cole. I'm Miss Johnson from the Department of Social Welfare. Do you remember meeting me in my office?
Yes.
I've come to talk about your application to adopt a baby.
Would you come in?
You're not so particularly interested in the full-blood child, are you? It's the part Aboriginal that you feel is needing help more than the other.
I believe that I could, definitely, bring up an Aboriginal child as much as a white.
Mm. Have you had any experience of Aboriginals and their walkabout, their sort of general traits and behaviour? Do you know any Aboriginal families?
No.
5-year-old Donna Meehan was taken 500 kilometres from her family home in central New South Wales before finally arriving in Newcastle after an overnight train ride.
I'm just sitting watching people walking past, just looking at shoes. And I don't remember seeing many shoes in my childhood, but I was watching all these shoes and this busyness, and I'm thinking, well, something's different. What's different? And then I realised they were all white people. The white welfare lady brought a tall dark man and a shorter white woman, and she bent down and she said, "Donna, this is your new mum and dad. Go with them and they'll give you something to eat." That's all that was said.
Donna's new parents were Elizabeth and Tim Popov, who'd migrated to Australia from Germany after the war.
This home was very different food, and because my parents were New Australian, they spoke German to each other every night, so it was a new language, a different language. Our house was right beside the railway track, and I remember often just watching the steam trains go past, and I used to think if I just follow that train, that would take me back to the camp. And I remember when I came home from school one day and I froze when I got to the back door because there was this song on the radio. And my adoptive mum, she made a point of buying me the record.
In the 1960s, there was still a